In addition to the gathering step that we have looked at previously, we will now have a look at the next very important step that we're using in our fencing. And it's one that allows you to change your orientation basically from a right hand or right foot side to a left hand and left foot side. As you know, we always have a bit of an asymmetrical stance. We always have an angle towards the middle line, so we're always basically standing either in a left or right orientation. When we want to change that, the first thing we do is we place the former rear foot as a new front foot. And for a short amount of time, I have these, they symbolize like the two angles I have towards the middle line. And then I take an adjustment step back again, so I'm in my white 133 fencing posture again. So it's one foot comes forward, the other one goes back, and I have a change of this angulation, as it were. Ideally, my body from the hip upwards is not supposed to move here either. So it's never going to work perfectly, but the idea is that you can change your steps, let's say underneath your body, like this. As you can see, I'm not shifting like this back and forth. Instead, the feet move under my body. At this point, this step only changes the orientation. You can, of course, shift, or you can use it to go back and forth as well. And this depends on where you place the first foot. If you place your rear foot in front of your former front foot, then you're slightly going forward with the step. If you're doing it the other way around, then the rear foot stays behind the former front foot. You're slowly going backwards. So you can use this. You can stay on the same position and you can go slightly forward or slightly backwards. And needless to say, it works the same way when taking steps back. The last thing you can use these steps for is really outflanking your opponent, which is why I like to call them flanking steps or outflanking steps, if you will, because you can, of course, vary the kind of degree you're doing. You can do them very close to the center line. So you're basically like going from one side of the buckler to the other side of the buckler, if that helps you. But you can, of course, make more strong angle, step more to the side, depending on the situation you're in. So for reasons of practice, you can just start with taking these steps, these flanking steps, on the same place. Then you can start retreating and advancing. And you can start to increase the angle to the side. Everything follows the same pattern of placing your feet, and you can vary in which direction you're going and how you're changing the angle towards the middle line or your opponent, respectively.
In all combat arts, you want to go where pressure takes you. So sensing the pressure that my opponent gives me, or building up a pressure line that I'm going to use to go into the weakness of my opponent is essential. And this is something that this kind of step is just perfect for. So standing like so and moving to the other side is just perfect to, for instance, let pressure pass me by, or building up a new pressure line into the weakness of my opponent. Note that when I do this changing step, that naturally one shoulder is leading and one shoulder is trailing. So here it's my left shoulder, my shield shoulder, lead in the lead. If I go to this side, it's my sword shoulder in the lead. Do not try to force your torso into a square arm position in order to hold both your hands forward like so. It's not natural, and you definitely want to have that kind of mobility that naturally evolves as you change from one side to the other. It's absolutely okay to have a leading hand and a trailing hand. However, of course, you have to be aware that this means that reach is different depending on which arm we are looking at. So the lead hand, of course, will always be the one with slightly more reach.
What people who train this for the first time often do is crossing with the rear foot. So when I'm taking my step to the side and placing the rear foot, they tend to cross the line like this. So this is something you want to avoid. Instead, you want to keep this roughly shoulder-wide distance between your feet. So like this, you have this distance and it stays intact. If it helps you for your practice, and if you're practicing the basic version of not going back and forth or changing the angle too much, then you can always aim with your rear foot for the middle line or the center line. So the rear foot is always more or less in the same position.
One more detail that you want to pay attention to is not planting the rear heel on the ground. Instead, when you adopt your stance, make sure that the rear heel is slightly hovering over the ground, which helps with your mobility.